One of our dramatic cases was this brilliant Harvard neuroscientist who described himself as having a photographic holographic memory. And he suffered a diving accident and was quadriplegic 300 feet under the ocean.
Wow.
And he survived but was left with multiple neurologic defects.
Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Christina Rahm, and I am with Dr. Todd. And I have to say, this is such a privilege to have you here, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited to have you here. I've been talking about you nonstop and I even told Gabriel, because we did a podcast, and I was saying that was one of the most important moments to meet you again, because we were exposed to each other at another phase of our lives, but to really have God put you in my life, I'm so thankful for that. So thank you for taking the time when you're so, I really mean this, you're so integral in my opinion to the world, and you're so important, and I hope you know that. I want you to know that.
Well, that's kind. Thank you.
Yeah. And what you're doing is, I believe, revolutionary, and I think, in life, there's so many things that can make a change, for the better or for the worse, and our bodies all react differently. We can't fix everything. I said to someone the other day, people die, unfortunately, or fortunately. We don't know where they go afterwards, right? I believe, like you believe.
Well, I do, but that's a different story.
Hey, we're going to talk about that sometime too. We're going to talk about that as well. Not today, because that'll take us an hour on a podcast. But tell us a little bit about. I want the audience to hear, because I really want to work with you. First of all, you're my friend, and nothing will change that. But I want to do things together so that we can impact lives while we're here, and I want to listen to your music. I've bragged about you so much to my mother. She's so excited to meet you, and my father, which for me, that's the ultimate compliment for me to tell them, because at my age, I still want to please them or make them happy. So I'm so excited for you to meet them. But I want people to hear your education, and I want to start there, and then we're going to go into the different things that you're doing now.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So I was first in my high school class and won the Bucky Pioneer Award, a major award distinction, and the Bosch and Gnome Science Award.
You did?
I did.
Wow.
Uh-huh.
That's great. I'm familiar with the awards. That's great.
Mm-hmm. And then I was at the top of my class in Northwestern, and after 2 years was one of 26 students in the country accepted to the elite program at Johns Hopkins called the 2-5 program. So basically applied to medical school after a year and a half of college, get into one of the top 2 schools in the country. And it was incredible academic freedom the first year, which was mostly completing undergrad. And then my first year of medical school counted as my final year of college, which was really cool.
That was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I remember hearing about that program.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't in that program like you. That was fantastic. What was that like? Did you love the students? Did you enjoy it?
Oh, they were amazing.
Yeah.
Very selected, very
Brightest
creative.
people, yeah.
Very fun-loving.
Yeah.
They gave rise in our medical school class to what was called the Hypotensive Club.
Okay.
I think we're the only class that ever did this, but to join the Hypotensive Club, abbreviation THC, the requirement was to go to the party.
Yeah.
And the party was the night before the exam.
Wow. Wow. This is new. I've never heard of this. I have some stories around that about Johns Hopkins, too. We'll talk about later. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm. So It was a great group. They were amazing. Incredible sense of humor, very smart. It was just a wonderful experience to be with people that were confident enough of their academic skills that they could also live life and have fun with the challenging experience of medical training, which is quite demanding, of course.
Yeah.
And then I was off to Georgetown, where I did internal medicine first, was a chief medical resident in the Georgetown system, and then I did a 2-year fellowship in pulmonary and critical care medicine. So my formal training is ultimately as a Hopkins and Georgetown trained internist, intensivist pulmonologist. So working with the sickest possible people with multi-organs failing all at the same time that have different demands, which I thought was great. I love the complexity of it. And then I got inspired by energy medicine and moved to California to learn medical intuition.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask a question? Do you mind if you don't have to answer it. So, in medical training, I have to say Johns Hopkins is different. It is. The only experience, we did research there. We had interoperative monitoring there as a company when I was the CEO of that company. And then we worked in the pain clinic, I think I told you, with they're looking at research on how to combat pain, interoperative monitoring research with neurosurgery, orthopedic surgery. I didn't work at Johns Hopkins. We got the research project approved through WIRB, then took it to Johns Hopkins, and then we did all that research there, and then also did business, in Johns Hopkins. But and then for a weekend I was an adjunct professor for oncology, orthopedic, and I think neurosurgery, where I just talked about patient registries and research and educated some of the residents. And then they had CME training, so I helped with some of that because of a guy named Dr. Dan Shuba that was in the neurosurgery department that brought me in. And but the doctors were so different, really, than any doctors. And because of my background with pharmaceutical and biotech, because of my position, I was able to do research projects, all over with the top doctors, whether it was immunology, dermatology, oncology, hematology, infectious disease with HIV and Hep C with Bristol Myers Squibb. So I was very fortunate. I was exposed to so much. And when you have a budget and you're doing investigator-sponsored trials and you have new human monoclonal antibodies or retroviruses, then you get to know those doctors, right? You guys are working together. And some of those I was a study coordinator, and some of those I was published with them. But usually it was because of our research in those departments, so I was welcomed right into the environments. Johns Hopkins was probably the university I felt like I related to the most, to be honest, because doctors were different. While I loved Wake Forest, but Johns Hopkins still was the college that I would say I was really familiar with. And I think there were some alternative, different ways of processing and looking at things because of the level of intelligence at Johns Hopkins. But were you ever criticized for going into a different direction of medicine, such as medical intuitivism?
Not yet.
Not yet. Because you're probably so respected because of your background, right?
Because depending on the audience, I can speak the very technical language of medicine, biochemistry, and now even biophysics. And in another audience, I can talk about realms of consciousness and realms of energy medicine. And I don't consider them to be different. My viewpoint, if our goal is to find solutions that have been found before, if you're a true scientist, you cast the widest possible net of all the things that may make a difference. Yeah.
And the one thing I've noticed one of the things I've noticed is that you're open. I listen, right? I learn every day. And I see that with you. And I have to say, to have your level of intelligence and understanding and open up your mind to other things. I studied at first, I had a master's of science, and my first doctorate degree was psychology. So, of course, Freud and all the different things that went along with Freud was a major example for me, right? But I don't know if people know this. I mean, he was a brilliant doctor, a brilliant intuitive, however you want to say it. He opened his mind. And if you look at, and I was telling you, I've read the book about how Johns Hopkins was started and the doctors experimenting even on what they were doing, but they ended up developing anesthesia, which has changed lives and saved lives all over the world. They almost sacrificed some of their own lives, right? To be able to be pioneers, really, in that whole industry.
Pioneers often do that.
Is that not the truth? I try stuff on myself first before I do on other people. And most true scientists are like that. But you went into medical to be a medical intuitive or to study it, correct? How many years, and what was that like?
It was amazing.
Did it change your life?
Well, in the context of that training, which involves opening your sensory perceptions in a whole different realm, going beyond just what is obviously visible to using awareness to go through deeper layers and levels of understanding of how the energetic ultimately creates the physical, and how things can actually be addressed in the energetic before they become physical or even after, there was a particularly profound experience in the context of that training which went on for a few years. And you've probably heard of Kundalini,
I have.
the serpent energy,
Yeah.
which is described as energy coiled at the base of the spine, and almost everybody now knows about chakras and with Eastern medicine, energy meridian. So the concept of Kundalini is a meditative process of cleansing the body of blocks and enhancing awareness to bring the energy in a balanced way all the way up the spine through all the energy centers, ultimately to the crown, which the organ of note for the crown is the pineal. And when that happens, it is said to be like the opening of 1,000-petaled lotus. And we did an exercise where we activated Kundalini, which in its own right is profound, but it is something that I didn't even know was possible, which is to actually run different colors of Kundalini. There's different flavors of Kundalini. And we did it in pairs, so you don't have many meditations where there is a scribe that you can actually describe what you experience at each level, and they write it down for you. And when I went through the colors of the rainbow, starting red and going up through the frequencies at the violet, I had a Jodie Foster-like experience in contact, where I literally went through a portal and came to a different dimension. And there was a doorway with guardians of the gate that gave a warning about the responsibility of the information. And when I went through, what I experienced was this giant room filled with DNA.
Could you hear it or see it? Or both? Or just you knew it?
Well, it was like an internal vision.
Right.
Yeah.
I've had those before. That's what I asked. Because I said to someone the other day, well, someone talked to me, and then I was like, well, they didn't really talk to me. Do you know what I mean? Like,
I know what you
but
mean.
I heard what they were saying.
Right.
And
Well, DNA talked to me. It doesn't have a mouth either. So.
Yeah. So it talked to you.
Mm-hmm.
And?
It said the understanding of science about DNA is correct but incomplete.
Okay.
DNA is indeed a massive encyclopedia of how to make all the proteins of the body that make life possible, but it's more than that. And most people, if they're not deeply into the technical aspects of DNA, all they really appreciate is as the double helix, which is this icon. It's
that's what you learned.
Cards.
Right. Yeah.
And what is not generally learned until you go to a deeper level is that DNA supercoils. So the double helix basically then coils and becomes a thicker rope, as it were. And that supercoils again, up to 7 levels of supercoiling to fit 6 feet of DNA into a tiny nucleus, 1/1,000,000th of a meter wide, 1 micron wide. And the information was that DNA is a supercoiled structure. It's an environment of moving charges. And if you have charges and supercoils, you basically create radio frequencies. The ultimate information was that DNA functions like a radio. Besides all the things that are happening as chemical triggers, there is communication between all the DNA in the cells of the body of what's happening instantaneously, being communicated. And the core admonition is that if you understand the kinds of frequencies DNA makes in health and disease, you know how to instruct a sick cell to become healthy or an old cell to become young. And that was the basis of the technology development I've done since, including the laser that has a waveform with the structure of DNA.
That's amazing. Mm-hmm. And the music.
And the music works with it too.
Did you know at that point, did you learn in that vision or what you saw, the tunnel that you went in and the vision, well, what happened actually, right? So you went through this journey and you saw all of this and felt all of this. Did you know at that time that you were going to create something that would impact the journey of the understanding of DNA? Because I really believe part of what you're doing, you're even using music, which I think I shared with you. When I do different formulas, a lot of them I use music, right? And I don't know if that's because of my mother. I don't think so. I think it's instinctively what I want to do. And I even sing. Not as good as your musicians sing. Hopefully we'll hear those in New York on stage. But I think you. I wondered if that came from that, or if you developed that after that experience. Like, did you learn that there and then created it because you saw what you needed to do, or did you take the knowledge from that and then decide you were going to develop something that would help with that?
There's a deeper part of the backstory.
Okay.
Which goes back to when I was 8 years old and fell in love with lasers.
Okay. 8 years old.
8 years old.
8 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I created civil unrest in the class because I had sequestered.
I wish so bad I would have been in school with you. I was sitting there when you said it. I thought, oh my gosh, I wish we would have been best friends. I wish I was in school with him. Tell me what happened.
Well, it had the L volume of the World Book Encyclopedia because it had the laser section in it. So when I was 8, I could tell you that laser stood for light amplification by stimulated emission of radiation. Yep. It's an acronym. And I could tell you how it worked and how you could make one. And then when I was 10, with my dad, I built my first quantum time machine.
You did?
I did. It was cool. And it worked.
10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me how it worked.
It was a magnetic engine.
Yeah.
It replicated the magnetic fields of different times of Earth's geological history. So plants growing under those influences would adopt different growing patterns. We actually proved it with the germination rate of radish seeds.
Did you prove it? And is that what
I didn't publish it when I was 10, no. But
did you ever use it or publish it after that?
Well, I've used magnetics.
Yeah.
And then when I was 13...
What did your teachers think about you and your classmates? Because you were different.
I'm still different. I'm less different now.
I want to know what my parents would have called you, because my parents called me special, and I hated that word because I was like, "What does that mean?" It was not a positive to me. I was like
special.
And I remember one day I said to my mom, "I don't want to be special," but she would have thought you were really special because you were different, right?
Oh yeah.
So what did they? What did your teachers? They had to know that you were brilliant.
I mean, they actually had me do different things even outside the class because I was not easily interested because I kind of got it quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I got to tell you this because I think I don't know if Kreider gets to meet you because he's at the lake, I think, with a friend. But my third son, he just did testing. He took a year and he did online at Colorado State. They have one of the top 5 programs where you then go into the school, but he wanted to travel and work with us. And it's been a great year. And he also does R&B, rap music. Mm-hmm. He has a band.
Fun.
Yeah, I would love for him to meet you. But Kreider was probably 6'7", talking quantum physics. Mm-hmm. Because of my background, I would talk to him, and he would sit down when people would come to our house and have these conversations with doctors that they were like, wow, how does this kid know this? But he never really, he did fine in school, but he wasn't like some of my kids were straight A's the whole time, right? Mm-hmm. Kreider was a little different. He was so bright. So Karen Floyd, who you'll meet, has she's very well known in all the universities. She does helps kids get into the schools they want. And she does a series of tests. So she called me and said that Kreider was highly intelligent, so I already had sent him to testing. I already knew. Mm-hmm. But that he would never handle a traditional ABCD school, yes/no school. Mm-hmm. That he would be bored. And I always knew that. I don't know what I should have done differently. I tried to put him in so many sports. But the truth is, by the time he was a junior, he was just so over it. I mean, he went to prep school. He graduated. He was fine. But she said, I know you're going to be shocked to hear this. And I go, no, I'm not shocked at all. And it's interesting because when you're that intelligent, sitting in a classroom and learning from a textbook that may not be completely accurate, Like like Kreider was a kid that went to school and was talking about other universes. I think I shared this with you.
Right.
And his teachers were like, "That's absolutely false and incorrect. Who taught you that?" He was like, "My mother." And then they didn't know what to say, you know. And he like always explored that world. And so here you are, a kid. How do I say this? In a lot of ways, you're smarter than the teacher. And you're on a different thought process, right? And because I hate to use, because everyone's different,
Right.
But you're also. Did you relate to the students?
Not until 6th grade when I took up basketball.
Were you good at basketball?
When I started, we had a big basketball grade school. I think out of 100 people doing a test, I was the third worst.
I don't know. That shows you where you started.
That's where I started.
Did it get better?
Well, we had different teams. It was such a big basketball school. We had an A, B, and C team. So I started on the C team, and I worked really hard. The next year I was on the B team in 7th grade. And then 8th grade I was on the A team that was undefeated and won the championship.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What were you good at? Shooting or defense, or what was your...
I was a forward, and I had a good outside shot. I also got the nickname the Lithuanian Rifle.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So you got respect because of that, because at that age, a lot of the kids are relating to sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was quite good in track when I got to high school.
That's what I was good at in high school, was track.
I was the first one to win a major letter, which was a whole thing.
What did you run in track?
I was primarily a miler.
I did 800.
Half-mile mile.
I did some 400s. I did 800, and sometimes I would do the mile.
Yeah.
But I won almost every time in the 800.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway.
I was like that in the mile.
Yeah. So you go to school, then you go to college, then you become a medical intuitive.
Right.
Along with a very, very impressive background, and then what you've done.
And the point about going to medical school, my interest wasn't so much being a doctor. It was to keep all the avenues open to learn about DNA. It was all about DNA. It's still all about DNA. I
used you as an example in a podcast yesterday.
Oh, well.
I actually have used you in more than one. So you listened to we've done probably 18 in the last couple of days.
Wow.
We haven't had a lot of people here, so it's, but I've talked about you a lot. And I said a lot of medical doctors go to school to learn to diagnose and treat, per how they're taught. But then there's the medical doctors that go as true scientists to really change the world. And I'm not taking away from the other doctors at all, because they study really hard. They save people's lives. But I said you were not a typical. I didn't think you went to school to I feel like you went to school to create part of your journey, which is to do what you're doing and to really have advancements in science. Was truly what I respect, because learning something's one thing, but then creating things that can change the world, because I have a series of patents that get approved that to me are very simple. The ones that are the hardest for me to get approved are the ones that the patent office doesn't understand. And then I have to keep explaining, right? Because if you don't have prior art and you don't have any other information on a topic, it's really hard, right?
Right.
And I've thought about you so many times, because we're filing 33. I actually have the data now from patients, and we're doing autism and ADHD and different things like that. But you truly are a pioneer, because you've broken through. I mean, you're a game changer. You've broken through all these different areas and different verticals, and you speak your truth, and people respect you because you've earned it. And then you continue to create. And you have 30 of your clinics, right, where you're doing your VSEL.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to explain everything.
Might be 31 soon.
It better be. What? No, I'm already telling people I'm working with Dr. Todd. It was funny. We were in a meeting, I think yesterday, and I said, I'm going to work with Dr. Todd. And I said, I really want to work with him. And Clayton was like, I'm working with Dr. Todd. And I said, well, I think he will be friends with both of us.
I will be.
But you've created this ability to impact people's lives. And I just want to say this to everyone, like I said earlier. I was telling Gabriel this, everybody's body's different. So some people will do the treatment. I noticed a huge change, by the way, right away. Clayton did too. Some people it takes time. Some people it takes more than one treatment.
Right.
And how do you explain that to your patients? That everyone's different. Some people react right away. Some people it takes time.
That's basically what we say.
Okay.
That even though we've seen some results which aren't even explainable
Yeah.
by the medical model. One of our dramatic cases was this brilliant Harvard neuroscientist who described himself as having a photographic holographic memory. And he suffered a diving accident and was quadriplegic 300 feet under the ocean.
Wow.
And he survived but was left with multiple neurologic defects, including neurogenic numbness of his left leg for 35 years. And as you know in neurology, things can improve after an injury, but if it hasn't come back in 6 months, it's usually gone forever. Well, this is a 35-year-old injury. We did the treatment, and in 3 hours, that condition for 35 years was back to normal. And he said, our neurologic model can't even account for how quickly this is happening.
No, they can't. There's no, in medical terms or scientific terms, it's hard to explain that.
Right. And he came up with a theory which I agree with, which is paracrine, that the nerves may be still alive but not have enough energy to connect.
Yeah.
They're idling, and the cytokines and growth factors and energy of the very powerful stem cells that we use from your own body, as we might explain as we go, they produce this energy and this cocktail of regenerative factors that can give those idling neurons enough energy to reconnect very quickly. So we've seen many cases, stroke, blindness, cerebral palsy, traumatic brain injury, where there's significant improvement in less than an hour. And it's really satisfying.
Yeah.
And not everybody is like that. So we say, well, we sometimes see amazing results very quickly. Sometimes it takes weeks, sometimes it takes months, sometimes it may take another treatment, that everyone is different, everyone reacts in their own way, and we can't predict in any one person what that is going to be.
But you're also looking at basically how it's affecting longevity, too. I know you can't make claims about it, correct? Is that correct?
We can share data.
You can share data. So what is the data showing?
According to the founder of the leading diagnostic company, True Diagnostic, that does the most accurate biological aging test that exists, which you probably talked about, the epigenetic clock,
Yeah.
a la Dr. Stephen Horvath of UCLA, who invented and is the world's leading authority, and with whom we are working, that when they first started processing our test, they had the chronological age of the person and then the biologic age. They were shocked because they thought they did the test wrong. So they repeated the test several times, and then they said that the results of age reversal were orders of magnitude better than anything they'd ever seen. So the usual result is biologic age being 3 years younger per treatment. So what we'd seen, there was this test called the TRIM study that used a combination of three things, DHA, metformin, and growth hormone. And over a year, people got 3 years younger biologically. But over 5 years, it actually regressed back to where they were.
It did.
Yeah, it did.
I didn't realize that. I'm familiar with that. I didn't know it regressed. Yeah.
Yeah, I saw the initial data, and then he made a follow-up presentation and shared that. I was like, oh, okay, so it doesn't stick.
It doesn't stick. Well, what if you did another treatment?
Well, that was that method.
That's that method. I understand. I just wondered. Yeah.
So what was important was when we started doing the testing, if someone hadn't had one of our treatments, their biologic age is usually the same or even a year and a half older than their birth date age. So we expected at baseline that people would be the same or a little older. If someone had had one of our treatments any time in the past 5 years, they were 3 years younger biologically. With 2 treatments, they were 6 years younger, and with 4 treatments, they're even 12 years younger.
I mean, I'm going to go in for 10 treatments. Dr. Todd, what if you do 10 treatments like Christine?
Are you like aiming for jail bait? What?
That's awesome. Dr. Todd, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Like just the gift of, and I have to say this, it's not even the reversal of aging or the change in age. It's the ability to really clean the system up and make it work better and function more appropriately. Because you can't, it's like a remote control, right? I just did a peptide line that we're launching that I really want to do when we do the clinics for the skincare. And we are doing a podcast, and Heidi, I went to school with her husband anyway. You'll meet her tonight. She was describing it as like a remote control, right? The peptides, the building blocks. And,
Right.
And, but adding that to what you're doing and just continuing to help the body so that it's able to function appropriately. Because she was like, if there's a film or if the battery's not working or something's not connected, you don't have the ability really for your body to create these changes, right? So part of and you don't know this, but part of the time when you were doing the treatment, I was really listening to the music, and it was I was blown away when you did Gabriel's, because I got to hear the music and just sit there, and because you weren't doing it to me, I really focused on the music. But being able to sit there and understand, and actually I could feel it, that you're helping the cells. And I looked at it in my head like they're regaining the energy to be what they used to be.
Right.
And I've noticed a huge change. Like, I have to say, I have been nonstop with work. And I think if I wouldn't have done that treatment, I don't know how I could. I'm sleeping less, I have to be honest, because I don't need as much sleep. Now, I do need to sleep more than I'm sleeping right now because of how busy we've been. But I've noticed since I've had the treatment, I can have 5 or 6 hours of sleep, and I feel great. And I'm able to go to sleep. You know what I mean? Usually I can't fall asleep. And now I can fall asleep. Like, I did the treatment. I've never fallen asleep on a plane unless I've taken some kind of medicine or something when it's overnight. And I fell asleep for 3 hours on the plane.
That's hard to do.
Can you believe that?
That's amazing.
Never, because I'm scared of flying. And I was like, what is going on? And I'm like, I need more of that, because sleep's my big issue. I don't mind waking up in 5 hours. That's a good night's sleep for me, right? 5 or 6 hours. But I do hate that I can't fall asleep, and now I can. And I'm not, if you ask me as a scientist to explain that, I don't have an exact reason for that. But I just know that that's helped me. And then Clay, his leg for 14 years has bothered him. It's the first time it's not bothering him. But I really like the story if I could reverse 12 years.
You can.
I want to do that. Well, I'm planning on, that's why I have to figure out a time you can come, because I want to do it again with my parents, when my parents come. And I'm trying to talk my mother into it. She's scared. My dad, but she wants to hear your music.
Okay.
And then my dad is super excited, because he walks probably 2 miles a day. He's a hunter, and he's also, we live on a farm, and he can't sit still. So despite his age and how old he is, my parents just don't lay down. They don't stop. And I'm so excited. But I have to tell you, just me sitting here, if I know that I can help his aging process by 6 to 7 or 8 years, I want all of that time for my father, you know?
Yeah.
And I do want to tell people this, just because you have a scientific treatment, like I said earlier, there is a journey we all have, and there is a path, and that we can't energetically, maybe we're supposed to go somewhere else and come back later and do different things, right? You and I have the same belief about some of this.
Strange beliefs, yes, we do.
Yes,
Yeah.
and unfortunately, we're not control of other people's lives. Do you know what I mean? So I got to tell you, so like even with my products, Dr. Todd, people will not understand that they can still get sick, right? And there's no way to create a magic something where people don't ever get sick again. But there is a way to create innovative technology and science that can make people's lives even better and more beautiful and more great, right? And that's what you're doing. But you're I can't make the claim, because I don't want you ever to get in trouble, that you're healing people, but all the data as it pertains that you have to Parkinson's and to Alzheimer's and different types of autoimmune, to me, is fascinating. I've actually the only other time I've ever seen anything even comparable is some data and information I was shown through the Gamble family. So, but just being able to experience it has been fantastic, and I want to tell you I appreciate it. And I mean that.
Thank you.
And I'm excited about our journey. and what we're going to do, because I'm excited about the fact that we're going to be able to touch so many people. And Nashville, Tennessee is such a great place because we've had so many people move here from LA and New York and Boston and from all over the world because it's grown so fast and there's so much positive energy here. So it'll be a fantastic place to start, I think, for us.
And I've got news.
What is your news?
I've got new news.
What? Like it's Christmas. You can't say things like that to me without me being like, that's great. What is your new news?
Well, you'll find this interesting. You probably know that the most aggressive disease of accelerated aging is a rare genetic disease called Progeria.
Yeah.
And without going into the biochemistry, it's amazing because it's just a single base change.
Right.
It's a SNP. Like there's some SNPs like people don't metabolize folic acid, the MTHFR. Well, this one single base change in 90% is an A to a T at position 1824 at a particular sequence on the first chromosome results in a cascade of effects where the protein that maintains the nuclear structure dissolves. It doesn't form properly, and the nucleus collapses. All the cells in the person's body are defective, and DNA damage is accelerated tenfold, and aging is accelerated 10 times faster. Average survival is only 12 years from the diseases of old age.
And I actually have had the experience because of my career to see that, and it's tragic actually. It's I don't even know how to explain it to someone to have a child that's happening with you.
Well, just last Friday, I got the letter that the FDA has accepted our proposed innovative protocol to do a clinical trial for treating Progeria.
Wow, that makes me want to cry.
Yeah.
That makes me want to cry. I worked with it was Alexion. We were working with AHUS, with us, and we weren't able to get the data to get it approved, and that's a devastating, disease. We were able to get it approved for paroxysmal nocturnal hemoglobinuria, and then later we were able to go back. But I was, as a scientist, really kind of depressed about that because of the kids. So you getting approved for that is huge. I mean, huge. So when will you start that?
The actual clinical trial will probably start first quarter of next year. But we've already done a treatment with this method when the baby was 11 months old, and they had a significant improvement.
They did. Will you do another one?
We plan to.
Yeah. But you wanted to get it approved so that you can,
Well, the problem is that the baby girl is in Israel, and the treatment was during the ceasefire in the war.
Yeah.
And as soon as I was leaving the country, the war started again. So I shot the gap, and the war is still going on, so we're working to bring them here so we can do the next treatment.
I'm supposed to be in Israel from December 5th through the 13th. I'll let you know if I'm going. If I go, I'm actually going with a group that's connected and protected. Now if there's a bomb, like, how much am I protected? That's what our whole, we just are canceling Nigeria, unfortunately. You have to look at world affairs because the truth is if something happens, then in your life is ended, then your journey to create and to help the world is over. So you have to protect yourself. So I really shouldn't encourage you to go with me. We need you here. And I know that that our company, I won't go if it becomes worse, because even though I've been guaranteed that I don't have to worry about it, I went to Lebanon when I was told by the medical community, don't worry, I was working in the Lebanese hospitals and presenting. And I even went over to Syria, and then Syria, bombed Lebanon. All this stuff started happening, and I was there, and I was stuck there, and they wouldn't even allow me to leave. And so now I understand that even when people tell me that don't worry, I'm like, well, I don't know. I've been through some things in my life. You can't guarantee anything, but when there's a war, you have to be really careful. So you did that first one, and you're trying to get the patient here.
Right.
So that is fantastic. So you noticed a difference.
Significant.
Tell me what you noticed. What happened scientifically?
Well, initially they thought the diagnosis was scleroderma.
Yeah.
because they're
You know, I've done 7 investigator-sponsored trials with scleroderma, sarcoidosis, pyoderma gangrenosum because, of the human monoclonal antibodies. So I can see what they would think because of the way that it's affecting your body and what you're looking at. So even when they did labs, they thought it was scleroderma.
Well, clinically, because she was in a skin prison.
Right.
She couldn't hold a toy or even turn over.
Yeah, just so that the audience knows, so scleroderma, sarcoidosis, all these things, you can actually encase a body. You can encase the lungs, for example, like a cocoon. It's a really, so I worked on a molecule, Amiviv was the name. Are you familiar with it? So they had Enbrel, Remicade, and then Biogen came up with Amiviv. And it was for psoriasis, and we also did trials in rheumatoid arthritis. But we were doing investigator-sponsored trials, and we were able to look at sarcoidosis and scleroderma, and great results. But the market, because you know how companies decide what they're going to launch.
Right.
They basically, I think, sold to a company in Israel, and they never did it. But in the investigator-sponsored trial that I was in charge of on the medical and the clinical side, we had good results. And I was devastated because I remember thinking, someone's got to save these people, because just the understanding, so the audience knows, you're really like imprisoning a person when you have that disease. You have a longer, that disease though has a longer lifespan than what you're treating,
Right. Well, actually, we look young because this skin gets so tight they don't have wrinkles.
Well, I was going to say, so we had, of course, when we did that, because I'm working in immunology, dermatology, and by the way, I did that project at Wake Forest with Dr. Feldman, and he was an immunologist. Actually, Dr. Urizo was in the project too, but I remember thinking, gosh, I would never have wrinkles, because it's almost like it looks like when my skin gets oily, it looks almost plastic. You know, there's nothing you don't, but the repercussion, like what happens in the body is horrible. So basically, they thought it was scleroderma.
And then the genetic testing showed that it was, in fact, the classic form of progeria, like the type that 90% of cases are genetically. And then it was further complicated. If it wasn't enough of an issue having the disease, then the war broke out, and then she developed severe influenza A pneumonia and almost didn't make it through the first night. The doctors told them to take the baby off the ventilator because they couldn't possibly survive. And so when they did the treatment, the baby was in the ICU on a ventilator.
Wow. So you actually did the treatment when the baby, after that diagnosis?
When the baby was in the ICU.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what happened?
Well, probably the most dramatic, she looked better the next day, brighter. I've got a little video with her smiling and the mom ecstatic that the baby's better. She improved to the point that she was able to go home. They didn't think she would survive the hospitalization. And 2 weeks later, for the first time in her life, she could hold a toy and turn over for the first time.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
That is so wonderful. I'm so happy for that family, and I'm excited that you got that approved by the FDA. That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a big step.
It's a big step. It's a very big step. I just want to say thank you. I know we have to go because we have another thing that both of us have to go to. And I can't wait for everyone to meet you and to get to know you. I already told everyone about your dancing.
Oh.
I was like his parents. So Anita Zucker, she's just an amazing woman. And I'm doing some projects in South Carolina that I really want to bring you into. And I want to bring Gabriel some of the stuff they're doing into, because you'll meet some people here that they have like a bioscience innovation hub. And they have like 100. So Bruce Holstein, who's not here, he has like 130 pharmaceutical or companies that are coming in, and they're doing, the government's doing different backing. They're doing the Human Genome Project and different things, and I'm participating in various ways, like the genetic testing and some of the stuff that we're doing. And then they're developing a clean room and stuff like that. So I'd love to have you involved in that. But just your ability. So I was telling them about how wonderful you are and how intelligent you are. And then I said, and he dances too. And she said, what, the Fred Astaire. And I go, I think his parents like ran the studios, right?
It was Arthur Murray's.
Arthur Murray's. I said something like that. And she was like, oh, I love that. I go, me too. I wanted to get up and dance with them. And I told them that they would love you. But you're a great dancer, by the way. And you, not only that, you make me happy, or you made everyone happy, because you're so full of life. And when you're as intelligent as you are, like, I have to, like, how do you, because no one's on your level, really.
You're pretty smart. I wouldn't go that far.
Well, I have to say this. Every time I meet with you, I just want to talk for hours because of just exchanging ideas. And the energy part for me is so important.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of doctors I talk to that I can't have the discussions with. And even the work, like figuring out how to treat particular diseases, I think it was one of the areas in science that I was able to do for the companies, was to be able to look at something and think, well, how do we apply this in a different way by changing a few things?
Right.
And to me, I didn't have to work at that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I just instinctively knew.
Right.
And I think that what you're doing is going to change the world, actually.
Well,
yeah,
that'd be lovely.
Yeah, and maybe we'll all live.
Well, we can all do that. Yeah.
We could all do that, and you can live to be, 130 if you take care of your body.
Yeah. I think that's just the beginning.
That's just the beginning. Yeah. So thank you. Next time we're going to talk about the other stuff.